today I can give brilliant negative speeches and tell you what is. And I can't help but mention this. I am a miner. I'm not a cattleman. I've had cattle all of my life, but I'm not a cattleman. I'm a miner. That's what I've always been. And whenever I look brave, I really want to get back to mining. I'm a very proud mining man. And I know the industry inside out, backwards, on top of. But we are not a mining country anymore. Mining country digs it out of the ground and sells metal. We don't do that. We dig it out of the ground and sell ground. BHP flogged off to foreigners. They've said they're not going to process in Australia anymore. Xstrata, Mount Isa Mines, flogged off to foreigners. They said they're not going to process anymore in Australia. So we're just sending ground overseas. So, the only future for our country, there's no manufacturing, there's no technology, there's no mining, there's just a quarry. As Heather said, there's just a quarry. That's all. And I mean, is there a single Australian? And believe me, we are a patriotic people. We are a patriotic people. Is there a single Australian that wants his country to be reduced to 2 quarries? But I'll tell you where there's 100% vote on this. With a couple of exceptions. One of the most courageous men I know. I watched him play football and win premierships for us, Shane Canute, and he's out there doing it again now, putting his body on the line again for us. Good on you, Shane. Good on you, mate. But except for a couple of people in the federal parliament, a couple of people in the state parliament, there's 100% vote in one place in Australia. And that's George Street, the parliament. Every day of their lives, they are selling us out and selling us down the drain. And I will never be able to put it as brilliantly as Heather did in the previous speech. I'll never be able to do it as well. And in the federal parliament, exactly the same. Every day. And I don't read the newspapers because I've come to a stage where I just can't, my rage, anger management's not good, you're right there. I can't, my anger and rage just takes over. But there was an article on Toyota and I wanted to cut it out, so I bought the newspaper and cut out the article on Toyota. Like, Toyota's just saying to us, hey, listen, we've had enough. You can't manufacture in Australia. We're rolling our swag. We're going overseas. So I cut it out. And while I was cutting it out, there's a little bar in the front saying Demographia report out on Australian affordability of housing. So I thought, geez, I better have a look at that. And whilst I was doing that, I noticed another article, which was ABARE, on foreign land ownership. So this, you can understand why I get mad. So I turn over the page to affordability. And Australia, for the 5th year in a row, has the most unaffordable housing in the world. Now, here's a country where except for 0.1% of it is worth less than $100 an acre, where less than 1% of it is worth $100 an acre, and you can't get a piece of land without paying, even in Charters Towers, $110,000 for a piece of land. Well, who's governing the place? Who is responsible for this? Penguins in Antarctica, aren't they? So except for Hong Kong, we're the world leaders. Except for Hong Kong, we're the world leaders in this area. We're the most unaffordable housing in the world for the 5th year in a row. We're the champions. But it's not the Australian people. It is the governments that are there. And in fairness to those people, and it took me a long time to get the guts. I don't go around thinking I'm any marvel. It took me a long time to get the courage. I was following, very much following Roel Walton, not the other way around. So I pay tribute to Roel. We're world champions in other areas. We have the highest child obesity rate in the world, arguably. We have the highest young male suicide rate in the world, arguably. So we're world leaders in a number of areas. Now, why are our children all fat? Why are our young men saying, I hate this world so much, I hate this life in Australia so much that I'm going to leave it. Why are they doing that? And I'm not sure. But Rosie Isles, a very good friend of mine from the days of my youth, not because she was good looking, but Rosie's the first Australian, a very proud Culcadoon. But Rosie got up at our suicide forum that we had in Mount Isa, and she said, look, we used to go down as kids down to the 2 Mile. And I thought, that's right, those damn Sheilas used to go down because there was a secret men's business down the 2 Mile. And I forgot that cheeky little Rosie. I mind you, when we got a bit older, we didn't mind so much. But Rosie said, we went down the 2 Mile and we swam and we, jumped off the swing down there and made slippery slides with the mud on the side, and we went shooting and bird shooting and all sorts of things. We did all these things, went out camping and everything. And she was a girl. And, that is not available. When we ran our last election campaign in Kennedy, it was boil the billy. We thought of all the important issues, boil the billy. And the way I came to that, my wife, Susie, over here, said, you can't take the kids down the paddock because you've got to get a permit to light a fire in the open. I said, are you seriously telling me? Well, she tells me everything equals. Are you seriously telling me that we can't boil the billy? She said, no, you got to get a permit. It'll take us 3 weeks to get a permit, so forget about it. So our campaign was boil the billy. You can't boil the billy in this country. And I'm not going to speak at length about that area because I want to get onto the positives. But I do want to say this. Never in my lifetime did I think that I would be with a lovely lady in the centre of the Gold Coast Surfers Paradise, about 2 kilometres from Cavill Avenue and right in the centre of Southport. And she had a house raided, her door kicked open by a bunch of people that would have been really at home in Germany in the late 30s and 40s. And they informed her that she's going to get $200,000 fine or 2 years jail or something of that nature. But there was jail and a 6-figure fine because she'd sounded a horn in a backyard to get rid of the flying foxes, which three deaths in one of our northern towns for leptospirosis, absolutely leptospirosis. The originating vector, not the communicating vector, is the flying foxes. But what I'm saying to you is, as Aidan has said, we are delivering back to you the ownership of your backyard. It is not the Crown's. It is not the government's. It is yours. And that is something that our forebears from the English side of my family have fought and died for since the Magna Carta. And it was written into the Magna Carta. If a deadly snake is in your house, it's your right to kill that snake. It is not my right as the state, the Crown, to tell you what you can and can't do in your house. That is your right. The election was announced. The first interview was the Premier. She venomously personally attacked the LNP leader 5 times to my count. Then he came on and he spent this is the initial hit. This is the kick-off of the campaign. And he said he attacked her viciously, personally, 4 times. And I thought, well, somebody's got this wrong because my notes don't say anything about him. To me, they're just sort of not really very important one way or the other. But what is important is to say that if you vote for us, it will be different. And I will stand on my record. I was in the cabinet in a government, for the best part of 8 years, I think it was. And I will stand on my record. The world changed for those people that I had responsibility for. And the first thing that I said, some of us think because I wear a big hat, my mother's side of the family, they've been in Graceville since the 1860s or 1870s. I'm My brother still lives in that area. So the first thing I said was not about my homeland, the north. The first thing I said was Brisbane. And it took me 44 minutes to get from Ascot into the CBD area. Ascot. I mean, it's just, stone's throw from the CBD. I'm like, who's in charge here? I mean, who is in charge here? And then as we were driving, as we were going so slow, I could count $70,000 million. Now, just get a picture on this. We were spending $8,000 million in 1990 as a government on everything. But here's $70,000 million I can see on works in the middle of Brisbane, and it takes us 44 minutes to get into town. There's something wrong here. But I wouldn't think that the people responsible for this are going to be the answer. The last thing that I would think. But what I said was that we will build a super fast highway north from Brisbane. And I've got to pay Rackerman, and his intellectual firepower, this bloke, credit here. But we built a super fast highway, and we can open up all that rough country, Dagular Range. You can't farm there or anything like that, but it's beautiful country to live in. We can open that up. And we will say that you will be able to subdivide and there will be no restrictions upon that subdivision. So you can get money at an affordable price. I disagree, I think, with Malcolm Turnbull on absolutely everything except one thing. He did do a paper with an Oxford Don, and they said the reason why house prices are through the roof has got nothing to do with house prices, land prices. And land is through the roof because there's no supply of land onto the market. Because the restrictions put on by local government and by state government have just made it impossible to get that flow of land onto the market. But we not only need the flow of land onto the market, we want to be able to give our young families a little bit of space to breathe around. Subdivision in Townsville, Steve Tottashini, in our area, I mean, the houses are so close together you can actually jump from house to house for nearly 2 kilometres. And they call it Bushland Beach. There's no bush there. You can't fit a tree anywhere. There's no hope of doing that. Well, who was responsible for that? And I'll tell you who was responsible for that. And I hope that David Moyle and Steve take this account. The Liberal machine in Townsville. Because they were looking after their rich developers instead of caring about the people, now and in the future. But we don't want this congestion and rabbit warrening effect in a beautiful city like Brisbane. We don't want that. We want people to be able to live out there, get to work in 30, 35 minutes, and that's what we can do with a very super fast highway. And it'll cost real money. And I have no difficulties with that because I know where the money's going to come from. And I'll turn on that in a moment. Again, whilst I wear a big hat and I love my rural industries and I'm most certainly a mining man to the nth degree, I love factories. I relate to factories. The two very courageous people, I think, that have taken, it's really cost them to make the decision they've made. But they know that they had to do it. One, Shani, I mentioned before, and the other one is Dean Mile. And the trade union movement is comprised to a very large degree of people who just want an endorsement for the ALP so they can get into Parliament. And to do that, they must ingratiate themselves to big corporations. So the Labor Party, the party of Ted Theodore, the great motivating force in Australian history that did so many wonderful things for us. They are the party selling us out and selling us off. They are the party, we went to a meatworks and the entire meatworks were all from overseas. I don't know where they came from, but they were all from overseas. And they were working for 30% below the award wages, 30% below. And they said, oh, well, we can't possibly compete on world markets or even within Australia if we don't have these people that'll work for nothing from overseas. Well, 3 weeks later, Rob Nyer took me to a meatworks, one of the biggest meatworks in Australia, Australian owned, not foreign owned like the other one, all Australians working there, and the cheapest processing costs in the country. So they're telling you lies. And Dean, for you people that have stood up and said, we are going to protect our workers' jobs, God bless you, mate. You've got a lot of courage. Now, we've discussed the dairy industry before, but, you know, it was one of the most horrific events. I'm very tough. As they said, we Cloncurry mob, we are tough. There might be no other characteristic. Won't have a lot of brains, but we are tough. I tell you, you don't pick a fight with Cloncurry boys or girls, I can tell you. You know, I knew we were going to win this thing the minute I heard Coal Seam Gas Battle, and then I heard Heather was involved. In the issue of the factories in Australia, we have watched factory out factory close. Let me go back to the weekend before last, Australian newspaper, right? So it says, and Nick Minchin was arguing with me on the television, one of those shows, and I said, are you sitting there seriously saying this is a good outcome for Australia, free markets? When are you sitting there seriously saying that to me? When you come from a state that has lost tens of thousands of jobs in the motor vehicle industry. And I just have to remind you, Nick, that 82% of the motor vehicles made in Australia, the light motor vehicles, light cars, I'll switch to motor vehicles, 74% of the motor vehicles made in Australia before Keating started this rubbish, 74% of them were made in Australia. This year, 14.7% only will be made in Australia, and unless more people stand up like Dean Mile, they'll all be made overseas, and every one of us knows that. This party is not going to stand aside and see that happen, right? Now, campaigning, I think it was with Adam Hollis, but I'm not too sure. We went to a tyre shop. The bloke got me aside, he said, Bob, we don't make any tyres in Australia. Ross Palmer is here today, a very great Australian, one of the most successful industrialists in this nation's recent history. Ross rang me up and said, we don't make any electric motors in this country. We cannot make a tyre. We cannot make an electric motor. Well, I'm telling you, we are going to become the government of Queensland, and we will be making those tyres, and we'll be making those electric motors, and we'll be making them here in Brisbane. Here in Brisbane. Because if you put a tyre on a Queensland government car, then it will be a Queensland-made tyre, made here in Brisbane. If you put a uniform on, it will be made in a factory on the Sunshine Coast. That's where it will be made. If you want to sell us an air conditioner to the Queensland government, then it will contain an electric motor built here in Brisbane, in a factory here in Brisbane. And let me swing back. I just sidetracked on the dairy. Let me swing back because, yeah, I'm a very tough customer, but that one really got at me. I lay in bed all day till about 11 or 12 o'clock. I just couldn't face the world. I was just so depressed because when I lost football matches, and I did lose football matches, I didn't blame anyone else. I always blamed myself. And on this one, I didn't blame anyone else. I blamed myself. It was on my watch that this happened. And I remember vividly what happened in the wool industry when Doug Anthony, that great Australian, his great marketing scheme was destroyed. And I've seen what happened to the wool growers. Then the sugar industry, Margaret Menzel, one of our greatest leaders in this state, stood up, and I knew what happened. I saw what happened there when we were deregulated. Our only life raft, ethanol, was smashed to pieces by the LNP government, and we were deregulated by an LNP and an ALP government. They signed an agreement between the two of them. The only time they've ever agreed on anything in my lifetime was they agreed to destroy the sugar industry by deregulating it. So we've only got one mill to sell to, and they can pay us whatever they like. Whatever they like. Not that it makes much difference, because as farmers, there's only two people to sell food to in Australia, and they pay us what they like as well. And that same weekend that I read about Toyota and I read about Demographia telling us, there was the ABARE report, and it told us that 11.5% of Australia is owned by foreigners. I mean, most countries on earth, you're not allowed to own any land. But no country on earth would have. And remember, half of our nation is desert. So, I mean, they actually own 1 acre and 4 is owned by foreigners. I mean, who could have let this happen? Penguins in Antarctica? No. The LNP government of Australia and the ALP government of Queensland. That's who. That's who sold us off and sold us out. And all we ask for to get our dairy industry back, and as Carl said, millions of litres coming across the board. But millions of litres probably coming from overseas too, and I won't go into that. But all we're asking for is the right to an arbitrated price. I mean, I had a free marketeer last weekend fighting with her on the television, and she said, the free market will achieve the end result that you and everybody else is seeking, ultimately. I said, I'm going to sue the University of Queensland because I did an economics course at the University of Queensland, and they told me when you had only 2 buyers in a market, that was an oligopoly, and supply and demand did not determine price when there are only 2 people. You needed an infinite number of buyers on one side and an infinite number of sellers on the other side for the free market to work. So I'm going to go and sue the University of Queensland. But this is why I don't know, and I'm not going to go into history, nor am I interested in history. What I do know is that we want an arbitrated price in the dairy industry. And within, and I knew this would happen, and every one of those people, like Ian Causley, they knew it would happen. If you deregulated the dairy industry, you absolutely knew it would happen. And the leader of the LNP in Brisbane, who represented a dairy area, and I tell you what, whoever's going to be representing Gympie, believe me, I'm coming at you. He knew exactly what he was doing when he deregulated that industry. You might say that John Howard didn't know what he was doing when he deregulated the labour market in Australia. And that's a pretty big call to say that he didn't. But in this industry, the LNP leader knew exactly what would happen. Because he'd seen it happen in the wool industry, he'd seen it happen in the sugar industry, he'd seen it happen in the tobacco industry, he'd seen it happen in the maize industry. He knew what was going to happen. And yet he went ahead and did it. So the day before deregulation, Dean, and you take note of this, we were on 59 cents a litre. The day after, we were on 42 cents a litre. That ain't any free market. That's 2 giant supermarket chains waking up in the morning and saying we can make an extra $1,000 million a year of profit. Why wouldn't you do it? And who can blame them for doing it? Who can blame them for doing it? So within 2 years of dairy deregulation, we went to a farmer committing suicide every 4 days in Australia. When I said this in the Parliament, the LNP leader said that those figures are not correct. So the silly beggar, I got up in the question time the next day and read out, it was their own health department report that had said it. It was his health department report. I read it out for him. But, I don't know that he's sort of... Anyway, I won't say anything nasty. I won't say anything nasty. But one little town in the heart of my dairying area, and, Heather says, why you feel so passionately? Well, you try walking down the street, a little town on the Atherton tableland, and looking them in the eye, knowing that you were part of a government that destroyed them. And a lot of them, they don't understand any of this. But that makes it worse for me, because I'm a part of the deceit. I'm a part of the deceit. So I just couldn't do it any longer. But that little town has the highest suicide rate in Australia. And I knew it was going to happen because I'd seen it in all the other industries. Doesn't anybody care? Don't we care for our fellow Australians? Yes, we do. The people in this room do care about their fellow Australians. That's why you're here. And we have common cause with every single employee. And, we've all got sons, brothers, fathers, whatever, working under an award. And if they're deregulated, they'll work for nothing. They will work for nothing. And if we keep letting these people in from overseas who are prepared to work for nothing by their standards, but for a king's ransom, but by our standards working for nothing, and undermine all of the wages throughout Australia, then we will stand condemned. But we are going to fight it. We are going to fight it tooth and nail, hammer and tong, every inch of the way. And for those unions that are sold out, well, we're going to yard you the same as we're going to yard the ALP, I can tell you. And when you yard a beast, you send it off to you know where. We move out of Brisbane through the Sunshine Coast now with a big, huge factory making clothing. We go through the Sunshine Coast where there's fortune being spent building these big roads up into, Carl Rackerman's area. And they'll get a hell of a lot of work out of that too, and huge development there. So that's the Sunshine Coast we've looked after. Brisbane we've looked after. We move on to Maryborough. And I think Rob Nye, there's a bit of prejudice showing here, but all the locomotives that roll on our rail in Queensland, by law, will be made in Queensland. And they say it can't be done. Donny Lane, I am paying, $1 million more for each of those locomotives because the government's made me build them in Brisbane. And I just smile sweetly at him. Too bad, Laney, too bad, He said, we won't be cost competitive. Oh, geez, we won't be cost competitive. I thought we were making $1,000 million off one single railway line in Queensland, Won't be cost competitive. But it may be that we have to pay a little bit more for our cars, for our clothing, for all these things. And that was the Australian way. We looked after the jobs of our fellow Australians. That was the Australian way. And the people that are there, I don't know what they are in the ALP and LNP, but I make no apologies for saying that they are not Australians. If they have any brains at all, and they have any thinking power, they're not Australians. Maryborough was the biggest heavy-duty industrial centre in Australia. It built all the sugar mills. Now it's going to rebuild all the sugar mills. It's going to rebuild them as ethanol plants and as electricity generating plants as well. And I know you can't see this, but look, I can throw out all the figures in the world, right? But nothing beats a picture. Now, I know you can't see it, but it's a very handsome bloke here in a big ringer's hat. And he's got electric silver, not grey, electric silver hair. and he's building up, believe it or not, in the days we used to build motor cars, a Holden motor car in Sao Paulo in Brazil. And he's filling it up for one Alcool 123 Rias, which is 74 cents Australian. So I filled up my motor car, 2006 I think it was, for 74 cents a litre. Usual disorganised self, as Heather said, I lost my photograph of me filling up my car in Minnesota in the United States for 84 cents a litre. I come home to Australia and I fill up my motor car for 139 cents a litre. Why? Why will this country and these states not go to ethanol? And I'll tell you why. Because the gas industry and the oil industry doesn't want it. That's why. There's nothing more complicated than that. And I told one of our leaders in Canberra, and I won't mention names, but one of our leaders, I said, if you can't stand up, and Heather, you know who I'm referring to, if you can't stand up to a slimy little germ, I don't mince my words, you've probably figured out, slimy little germ like that, how the hell are you ever going to be Prime Minister of Australia and run a country? Because, we're run by jellyfish. As Aidan and Rob Nye said earlier on today, we're run by jellyfish. But if you can't stand up to one little... he was interviewed in the morning and then I was interviewed by the same crew in the afternoon. He's a young interviewer. And he said, I interviewed this bloke early this morning, as slimy that I'm talking about. And I said, did you have a bath afterwards? And the whole television crew burst out laughing because when the interviewer came out from the meeting, he said, I've got to have a bath. That's what he said. He went down and here is, people saying they're going to be the leader of Australia. They can't even stand up to that. I mean, they just aren't. And I'll just say something in conclusion on that too later on. But we go from Maryborough then into the coal mining areas. Now, when I was mines minister, and I had to have a meeting with one of the leading mining bosses in Australia, and I said, I thought it was about 2 or 3 months. I know it was 2 months when I was mining, but when I was mines minister, it was about 2 or 3 months. And he said, yeah, I kicked 6 mines off then. Yeah, it was about 3 months from when you said, right, we're going to mine, applied for your application for a mining lease, to when you actually started putting the dozers in 3 months. And I said, well, people are telling me now, and I know of a number of cases where it's been 6 years. Now, some people tell me that they've got through in 3 years, but it's gone from 3 months to somewhere between 3 and 7 years to get. Now, we've got 3 huge coal mining operations in the Galilee Basin. This is not where people sort of live in the sense that it's way out in the middle of nowhere. It's, out my old homeland. And we want to bring those 3 projects on as quick as we can humanly possibly bring them on, because there's a huge amount of money. And one of those people has said she'll bring the workers in from overseas. Well, I'm telling you now that she won't. She'll be employing Queenslanders. But Glad's, they talk about two-speed economy. There's no two-speed economy. I'm so angry that I really will lose control if someone else says to me two-speed economy. There's no two-speed economy. There's two-town economy. There are only 2 towns in this state that are doing well. And I defy you to go to any shopping centre or any place anywhere in Queensland and tell me that they're doing well. They're all on struggle street, except for Mackay and Gladstone. Except for Mackay and Gladstone, right? Now, 2-town economy. In Western Australia, same thing. 2-town economy. Port Hedland and Karratha going like a house on fire. The rest of it is on fire in a different way. So then we get to back in the sugar areas. Now, ethanol, there's a lot of reasons. IEMA, New South Wales has gone to ethanol, by the way. IEMA said, I cannot go another day with it on my conscience that people are dying that don't have to die. The head of the AMA, chief doctor for Australia, if you like, he said more people die of motor vehicle emissions than motor vehicle accidents. And Heather, when you and Alan Jones were quoting people dying from this time last century, when Ted Theodore, whose picture I sit under, Dean and Lottie have seen it in my office, the founder of the Labor movement in Australia, Ted Theodore, when he formed his union, 1 in 31 of us went down the mines, never came back up again. Never came back up again. And we were told there was no problem down there. No. There's a lot of things cause that lung problem. No, it's got nothing to do with, damping down. Well, in Africa, the Aboriginal Africans already had laws protecting with damping down. In Wales, where, the Welsh and Cornish people were probably treated worse than the Aboriginal Africans in the mines, they had laws protecting and damping down. In Australia, we didn't. We just continue to send people down there. Now, if it happened in 1901, I have no doubts that they won't hesitate to be doing it in 2001. That's for certain. So the laws are needed there to protect. The men that worked on the Sydney sewage ditches, every one of them worked there for more than 2 years, died of the lung disease. But until we got our unions, that's the way that we were treated. And that's the way we will be again if we're deregulated. Let me say with ethanol comes cheap petrol, cheaper petrol. I'm not going to say cheap, I'm going to say cheaper petrol. But you can see, I don't want to give you all the arguments or all the statistics. I'm just saying there's a picture of me filling up my motor car in Brazil, 74 cents a litre. And you can ring up in America and find out what petrol prices are, because the differential's still there between ourselves and America. It was 84 cents in Minnesota, where these countries are all on ethanol. But there's hardly a single country in the world that's not now on biofuels. I know France, I know Germany is. I know the European Union have agreed that everyone goes onto biofuels. And the only state on earth where it should be done, because we've got a sugar industry bleeding to death. We've closed over the last 15 or 16 years 7 sugar mills, 7. We've only got 21 or 22 left, and then we'll have no sugar industry at all. I mean, and what are we going to do about it? I'll tell you what we're going to do about it. We're going to give you ethanol, and that will give you a guaranteed price out into the foreseeable future. And we'll also give the motoring public. Now, electricity, we burn all of our sugarcane fibre. When you take the juice out of it, we burn it to get rid of it. So we burn our sugarcane fibre to get rid of it. A little tiny 5% of it is used to produce electricity. Now we're going to go from that 5% up to 100% of that sugarcane fibre. So instead of producing 5 megawatts of electricity from our power stations, we'll produce 75. And there will be a saving, and this is technical, so I'm not going to go into it, there'll be a saving of $250 million a year, because North Queensland will be producing its own electricity up there, and we will not have to subsidise North Queensland's electricity. We've got no power stations up there. By the time you pump the electricity up, it's enormously costly, and there has to be a government subsidy, so we equalisation of electricity charges. So it pays for itself. But cheaper electricity, because there's no coal. You don't have to pay for coal. You don't have to employ a single extra person, because all your fitters and turners and your electricians and your engineers, they're already there. It's a sugar mill. They've already got a little plant working now. So no extra wages and no cost to coal. So you're not going to have cheap electricity. Of course you are. Now, when I go around, people say, mate, it is so tough. I mean, I've got to decide whether to switch the lights on tonight or whether I have a feed. I mean, you really have to be down close to the people to understand how people are suffering because of the cost of living. From Townsville, we'll build a giant transmission line. This is the thing governments used to do. Governments don't build transmission lines anymore. I mean, well, if you don't, then you can't get electricity out where there are 33 mining projects that are not mining. And to quote Joe Gutnick at Legends, you will have, if I can get electricity at a reasonable price, adequate amount, and if I can get transportation adequate at a reasonable price, then we will have Legends Phosphate, which will give over 2,000 million into the Australian economy every single year. Every single year. I mean, it's 400 million subsidy on that line. But when you get it back in your first year by way of taxation, when those mines open up. So what we're saying is when those mines open up, when the giant Pentland project, which will be a child of ethanol and a child of the transmission line, when they open up and we build the biggest wind farm in the world, which already they spent about 7 or 8 million on at Hewenden, and we open up the huge coal reserves there, then, all this money will flow in, and that's where you'll get the money to build a super high-speed highway that we require here and to build our transmission line. And I can't finish off by saying the people of Cape York and the Gulf, who are mainly First Australians, I mean, they cannot own their own homes. In the year of our Lord, 2012, there is no such thing as a title deed. There can be no economic growth because you need to borrow money from the bank. And the bank will not loan you money, and quite rightly so. I'm not criticising the bank. There needs to be security. For every loan, there needs to be security. Well, they can't provide security because the government won't give them a title deed. And they go into this election after having been there for 20 years. And the people have asked again 1 million times for a title deed. That's all, like everybody else on earth's got. Well, they will get their title deeds and their houses will be built and the construction work will be undertaken, as it was when I was minister, by exclusively local Indigenous labour. The Gold Coast, and I racked my brains about the Gold Coast, and unfortunately, because we want to have impact, but we want a place in Queensland that is sophisticated, that is high class. Well, I probably won't be able to afford to go to it, but I like looking at it, and a place of high fashion and sophistication, and a great place for artists. Now, we've got a project that I just absolutely love, because the Gold Coast will be restored. And people have said to me, it's a bit jaded. So many of these things have been closed down there. But in one hit, we're going to reverse all of that. And my family had a few quid. We had a house at Service Parish, like a lot of Westerners in the old days, when it was just, a fishing village, I suppose. And so I've sort of gone there every year of my life. A bit ashamed and embarrassed to admit that. It sounds a bit like you're a bit rich. But I love the Gold Coast, and every Queenslander loves the Gold Coast. But we don't want to see it go down the shit, and we're not going to let it go down the shit. Now, I mean, these big giant parties have had the wealth and structure of government behind them. I mean, they're 35 members of parliament, the LNP, or whatever it is. They've had all of this time to do something or propose something, and they haven't done a damn thing for the Gold Coast. Well, we're going to do it, I can assure you of that. And I suppose at this stage I should start to wind up. In the last 10 years of the Bjelke-Petersen government, every year we built the $200 million plus tourist resort. Every year we started work on a new major irrigation and development dam. Every year we built a new mining town. And every 2 years we built a big new power station. Now, to my knowledge, and there's probably exceptions to this, but to my knowledge, not one single one of those things has happened in the last 20 years. And that's the difference between a government that's oriented towards development and creating jobs for their people and a government that runs around handing out lollies before an election. Like, we'll do up your local oval, or we'll do up your local, community centre, and you get your photograph in the paper cutting a ribbon. And you've got absolutely nothing to do with government. Now, whether they're just cowards or whether they've got absolutely no brains or interest in the people in its future, I don't know, and I don't care. But I'll tell you one thing, we're getting rid of them. That's one thing. The sale of the assets, what does that mean to you? Well, the electricity industry, I'll just keep that till last. But Rob Nyer said the sale of assets. The Gateway Bridge was built by the Queensland government when I was in cabinet, and we agreed to it on the basis that it'd be a toll, pay for itself. In 20 years, it'd paid for itself. We take the toll off, and the people then have this magnificent asset for free. Well, what happens is this so-called Premier of Queensland, she decides 3 years before it's going to be sold off, that it's going to have the toll taken off, she decides to sell it. So she can get, I don't know what it was, $1,000 million. Wasn't much short of that anyway. $1,000 million. She gets that money and uses it to buy her way through the next election. That's what she used it for. And the poor people of Brisbane are left paying $50 a week. Something like a fifth of the entire population of Queensland has to cross that bridge every day to get to or from work, and they're up for $50 a week so that she can buy her way through the election. I mean, that's the only reason. But that's what happens if you sell off those assets. Those assets belong to the people. They do not belong to the Crown. The Crown has got this badly wrong. And I better conclude on this note. No, I've got to mention Woolworths and Coles should be disappointed. When we had our first press conference, the first question was, who's going to back your party? And I said the 120,000 small businesses that have been destroyed in this state, the 50,000 farmers who have been destroyed in this state, and all of the ones that are still out there that know they're just living on borrowed time, because the newsagents will be closed down, all the bakeries will be closed down. There's nothing that they don't want and they're not going to take. And they've got the muscle power to do it. They've now taken all of the petrol bouses. I mean, they now control the liquor outlets. I mean, there's nothing that they don't want. There are only going to be two players there. And I congratulate my son Robbie, because when they said 24-hour trading, he was interviewed by the media and he said, hey, listen, I'm for 24-hour trading. I finish work every night, 8 or 9 o'clock, or I get meetings on. I never get home before 10 o'clock. And he said, I'd love to have 24-hour trading. Everyone in Mount Isa wants 24-hour trading. But he said, ask the second question. Do I want for only 2 doors for me to walk through that I can buy everything from? And no one in Mount Isa wants that. So he said, I'm opposing it tenaciously. And truly, I really do conclude on this note. The Premier of Queensland, in another vitriolic attack upon the LNP leader, she said, he's owned by Clive Palmer. And I said, well, you know, he just said on the news yesterday that unless you vote for him, you can't get rid of the Labor government. Now, that is just a lie, a flagrant, unadulterated lie. It does him no good, and it doesn't do anyone in politics in Australia any good. Saying something that you absolutely, unless you're a moron, absolutely know is simply not true. It's simply not true. You just get up there and say something that you know is not true, that it's a lie. I mean, how terrible, you know. But I said, I don't want to be one-sided here, because she said that he's owned by Clive Palmer. And that is wrong. That is just simply not right. He's not owned by Clive Palmer. Clive only owns 50%. Coal Seam Gas owns the other 50%. I got a great mate in the north. He died a few years ago. And I miss him so much, Bruce Dixon. He had the Tully Times newspaper. The current editor hates me there because, you know, he knows I love Bruce so much. But Bruce had the whole front page, $5,000 award for anyone who can tell us the difference between the LNP and the ALP. This paper will give you $5,000. And every fortnight, a little bar on the top that'd say, I'm sorry, Roll, I am really wrong. But every fortnight, still no one has come forward to collect the money. But Bruce, he always put one over me. But, you know, I found out that, and he's dead, I can't put one over him. Bruce, I'm going to get you. But I found out what the difference is. She is going to sell our electricity industry, our giant power stations and our transmission line. We all know that she's going to sell them if she gets re-elected, right? Here's the difference. If the LNP gets elected, they'll sell them faster.